wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
Welcome to the Sunday Stoic Podcast. This is Steve coming to you from my chaotic life in Conway, Arkansas. If you hear any noises, it's my son running around outside the door. Before we get started, I want to thank Seth for joining as the newest patron. I know a few patrons have had to go because of coronavirus shortages and things, and that's very understandable. But thank you, Seth, for supporting the show. As a $5 a month patron, Seth can gain access to archived episodes from the Sunday Stoic, as well as join in on the at least monthly book discussion that we've been having. We've been discussing recently we've been discussing Marcus Aurelius. We will soon be discussing the Discourses 1 through 10, and I'll have more information on that on Patreon. This week, I want to talk a little bit about choices. And we're going to focus just on one reading from Epictetus this week from Book II, Chapter 15. And what I want to talk about is we know that it's important to make well-informed choices as a Stoic, and then to stick with them, to really ride them out. But there are times when we also have to be willing to change our mind. And we know as Stoics, all we really have is the power of choice, right? That's one of the few things in our power, is the power of choice. Now, the outcome is beyond our control, but choice is within our power. And interestingly, that can be a blessing and a curse sometimes. So we want to talk a little bit this week about that power of choice. The Discourses of Epictetus, Book II, Chapter 15. There goes my son. When some persons have heard these words, that a man ought to be constant, and that the will is naturally free and not subject to compulsion, that all other things are subject to hindrance, to slavery, and that in the power of others they suppose that they ought without deviation to abide by everything which they have determined. But in the first place, that which has been determined ought to be sound. I require muscle tone in the body, such as exists in a healthy body, in an athletic body. But if it is plain to me that you have the tone of a frenzied man, but yet you boast of it, I shall say to you to seek a physician. This is not tone, but flab. In a different way, something of the same kind is felt by those who listen to these discourses in a wrong manner, which was the case with one of my companions, who for no reason resolved to starve himself to death. I heard of it when it was the third day of his abstinence from food, and I went to inquire what had happened. I have resolved, he said. But still tell me, what it was which induced you to resolve? For if you have resolved rightly, we shall sit with you and assist you to depart. But if you have made an unreasonable resolution, change your mind. We ought to keep our determinations. What are you doing, man? We ought to keep not all our determinations, but those which are right. For if you are now persuaded that it is right, do not change your mind, if you think fit. But persistent say we ought to abide by our determinations. All right, we don't need to read any more of that today. Obviously, this episode is going to be a little different because I'm recording this as a video while I'm reading, so I'm not going to edit it very heavily. But what's going on here? Epictetus is saying, yeah, we talk about being constant by making decisions, sticking to those decisions. But if you have new information come your way, you need to change your mind. We might think of it as a virtue to stick with our decisions, and to depart from those decisions might feel like it's not virtuous, because we know one thing that's easy to fail at is to being constant, to making decisions and sticking with them. Like, oh, from now on I will journal every day, and from now on I will exercise every other day, or whatever. And then we fall from those habits because we are bad at sticking to them. But he's saying there's also a vice in sticking to things, sticking to decisions that were made under incorrect information, or perhaps you did not analyze the information terribly well. And so it's more of a virtue to change your mind in those cases than to stick with your bad decision. Decisions are an interesting thing. As I said earlier, they are the part of Stoicism the thing that Stoicism tells us we have the most control over in our lives, our thoughts, our choices, things like that. Now, there's a TED Talk on happiness by Dan Gilbert you might want to check out. It's interesting as well, in which he says that choices can actually lead us away from happiness. If we have too many choices and we regret choices too much, we can actually we can kind of think back on the decisions we made and wish we had chosen option B instead of option A, and it makes us unhappy. So sometimes a lack of choice leads to more happiness. The example he gives, I'm going to get this slightly wrong, but individuals take a photograph. They take two different photographs and they develop them, and they get to choose one or the other. And they say, well, I want photograph B. I'll take photograph B. And they say, okay. And they put photograph A in a drawer and say, okay, you'll never see that one again. Here's your photograph. And they ask them how happy they are with their choice a month later, and most of them are pretty happy. But if you give them photograph A and B, and you say, well, take the photograph you want, and in a month, if you're not happy with it, maybe you can send it back and get the other photograph. People who do that, who have more choices in that sense, often are less satisfied with their original choice. They have regrets. They change their minds. They're wishy-washy about it. And that's kind of interesting in that sometimes if we think about our choices too much and lament on the past, we can be less satisfied with our current lives. So choices are important. We have to make good choices. We have to stick to our choices when it still makes sense to do so. And we will be happier. And in many ways, I think Stoicism actually has that kind of built into it, this idea that having regret is not good for us, and that stewing over past decisions is not good. We know the past is indifferent. We're supposed to remember that. That keeps us from regretting the past too much. It also, if you practice Stoicism like the ancients did, and you think that there's fate involved, right, or the gods are directing your life, then things always unfold the way they're supposed to, and you have very little choice in what's happening to you, but you do have some choices on how to react to those things. And so things that happen to you were not really your choice. You just had a few decisions to make along the way, and maybe you can find happiness there, knowing that you did the best you could with the options available to you. And when you chose poorly, you've learned from it, and you've adapted, and you've overcome, as long as you don't stick to those bad decisions. So, as we move through life, let's make the best decisions we can. Try to stick with them as long as the information we're getting is backing up that original decision. In the Reformed Guide to Stoicism, it's kind of interesting. There's some information in there about making decisions and about dividing your psyche into two parts. The part that's you of every day that goes about your business, and the part of you that's like the commander, the ruling faculty, right? The ruling faculty looks at all the intelligence information and says, every day I need you to journal. And you treat that as if you have received orders from the commander, and you must obey. And don't question it, because the more you question, why am I doing this? Why am I getting up in the morning? Why am I going to run? Why do I need to journal? Why do I want to take a cold shower? Or if you question the decisions of the general, you're going to be unhappy. But if you obey them as if they were directives, and your only choices in the matter are, what time will I get up? How far will I run today? What should I have for breakfast before I go? Do I want to have breakfast before or after I run? Those kinds of things. Then you're more likely to follow through. But once again, if you realize the general has made a bad decision, then you may have to change your habits. Don't kill yourself by starving yourself to death because you made the decision and you think it's a virtue to stick with the decision and a vice to break from that decision. It's a virtue to break from these big decisions if you realize it was a bad decision. So, I hope we don't make too many of those big time bad decisions, but I'm sure we will. I've made plenty. The guy I hired to build my shed out back was a bad decision. I have to get rid of some termites in it now, so that's what I'll be doing the next few days. So wish me luck on that. But I hope everyone's doing okay with everything that's going on. I know here where I live, things are starting to open up a little bit more. I don't know what will happen. Restaurants are starting to serve people next week at a diminished capacity. Barbershops are opening, things of that nature. We'll see what happens. So thanks for bearing with me in these weird times. I've found it very difficult to go hide off somewhere and record a normal episode, but I have managed to get one out to you each week. And thank you for listening. Share this podcast or an older one that's better with folks on social media. Share it with your friends. Spread the word of Stoicism. And you can follow me on Twitter, Sunday Stoic. On Facebook, I have a page as well. I hope to see you soon. Remember to email me, sundaystoic@gmail.com, or help me out on Patreon, patreon.com/SundayStoic. And you can even PayPal me a couple bucks if you happen to have a couple extra bucks. But for now, give that extra couple bucks to a restaurant worker or someone who really needs it. Don't worry about throwing it to me for now. But you can, when this is all over, you can PayPal a few bucks my way if you wish. Use my email, sundaystoic@gmail.com. But I appreciate everyone who helps support the show to keep the lights on. And let's stick with it and seize the day. Carpe diem. Now let's see if I can get this video to work.